Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at our fifth session for our Getting to Contract series powered by APS. We are very thankful for you to all be here this morning. Today we're going to be talking about federal proposal preparation, how to get that proposal together to be able to work with the federal government. So we'll have Gabriel Sam Groves present today's presentation. Before that, we have just a couple little reminders. If you are going to be sticking around for our business new member orientation, please just one second. Sorry about that. And just make sure to be stay on the line, and we will get that started at 11 this morning. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We will be answering questions towards the end, so please make sure to include those there. We'll also share Sam's information in case you have any further questions. We'll be sharing the recording and the slides for today's session in our post-event email. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Sam to kick off our presentation. And thank you again, Sam, for your time with us today.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to participate in this workshop. And I want to thank the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Minority Business Development Agency Phoenix Center for inviting me to participate. This is going to be an extremely long presentation. We have over 50 slides that I put together for you. So we're going to go through it as quickly as possible. And these slides will be available to you to read at your leisure later on their website. I've got a lot of information packed in here for you. This is the overview of what we're going to be covering this morning. And let's go to the next slide, please. What we hope to convey to you this morning is how you can ensure you're answering the mail when you're putting together your proposal in response to the government's solicitations. And we want that proposal to demonstrate that you understand the government's requirements, that you're articulating clearly to the government what your capabilities are for successfully satisfying their requirements. We want the government to take a look at your proposal and be satisfied with everything that you provided so that they will consider you for a contract award. And we're going to be covering what matters the most in your proposal and how to use the government's rating system to maximize your proposal, because all that information is actually readily available to you in their solicitation. Next slide, please. Now, we covered in a previous session talking about how the government conveys its requirements to the industry. How do they advertise their requirements? They do it through the use of solicitations. The solicitation is any request to submit offers or quotations to the government. They are soliciting your bids and your proposals to satisfy their requirements. There are various types of solicitations. This is a review of what we talked about last time, but there's requests for quotations, invitation for bids, and there's requests for proposals. Each one is governed by a separate part of the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR. And the government decides which type of solicitation it's going to use based on what the acquisition is going to be, what it is that they're buying, and the strategy that they're going to be utilizing, whether it's going to be sealed bidding, or it's going to be proposals that will then be negotiable. Next slide, please. The government, because it is extremely regimented and it standardizes how things are done according to the FAR, there are various forms that the government uses for their solicitations. Today, we're going to be concentrating on the standard form 1442, which is basically for construction contracts, because I believe that most of the clients working with the chamber and with NBDA are construction contractors. So this should be of great use for you. For those of you who are in the service industry, a lot of this information can be extrapolated in what you will be doing in your proposal preparation in response to a service contract. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, please. And as we mentioned in the last briefing, the government uses the uniform contract formatting for how its contract documentation will be structured. And under the UCF, or Uniform Contract Format, a solicitation consists of sections A through M. The awarded contract will go from A through J, and then KLM goes into the contract file. It's not part of the awarded contract. The solicitation goes exactly from A to M. And we're going to be covering all of those little sections today, okay? Next slide, please. Section A is the front page of the solicitation. On this slide, you're going to see what the information is that's covered in Section A. Next slide, please. Like I said, we're going to be whipping through this relatively quickly. This is a snapshot of what Section A looks like, the front page of a 1442 solicitation for a construction acquisition. And the next slide after that is the back page of that same form. Okay, next slide, please. Special emphasis for all of you offerers who are thinking about putting together a proposal in response to a solicitation. Section A has all of these various bits of information. You can go ahead and read this slide later, but basically what I want to convey to you is how important it is for you to read the entire solicitation from cover to cover, and then read it again to make sure that you don't forget any of the information or anything falls through the cracks. Because especially Section A, you'll see that it tells you everything you need to know about this particular acquisition, and you can determine your eligibility to propose for it. If it's a set aside, for instance, for a particular category of small business, you take a look at Section A, that first page, and it'll tell you whether or not you yourself are eligible to put in a proposal for it. So every page of a solicitation is extremely valuable. You need to read everything to make sure that you garner all of the information that solicitation contains for you so that you don't forget anything. Because leaving something out of your proposal, a simple minor omission could be enough to kick you out of the competition, and you don't want that to happen. Okay, next page, please. The next slide, please. Okay, Section B of the solicitation is where your CLINs are listed, contract line item numbers. That tells you what is being purchased. And again, this slide here lists the things that you're going to be wanting to look at in Section B. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of 2 CLINs that are on a sample solicitation. This is what the CLINs look like, and where you see that blank line, that's where you would be inserting your proposed pricing. Next slide, please. Section B could contain also information regarding options, if that acquisition is going to include options. This is where the government lists the information about the options, and it tells you what the schedule, their intended schedule for exercising options would be. So there's quite a bit of information that's very important for you in Section B. Next slide, please. And this is special emphasis for you. The things that you want to pay special attention to in Section B as you're putting your proposal together. Okay. Next slide, please. Now for Section C, D, and E, I'm not going to put snapshots of those sections in here for you, but these are the things that you're going to want to pay special attention to in each of those sections. Now, section C is where the government incorporates the actual documents that govern the performance of the contract. The statement of works, a statement of objectives, or a performance work statement. Performance work statements are used for service contracts. And for both types, construction or services, of course, the Department of Labor wage determinations are used. And that's what you will include in your proposal for the pricing of your labor. If those documents are not too thick, they'll be actually incorporated into the solicitation via Section C. Section D is packaging requirements, especially if you're providing supplies or equipment, things like that. It tells you how you need to package those items. Section E is regarding inspection and acceptance, whether it's going to be accepted and inspected by the government at destination or origin. And it tells you the various requirements. In some instances, if you were doing first article equipment, things like that, all of that information will be very, very important to you, how you would submit the first article, how it would be inspected and accepted, and then you would go on to the next phase of an acquisition. So all of these sections, section C, D, and E, valuable information, and each section of solicitation will have clauses in it pertaining to that actual section that you want to pay attention to. Next slide, please. Section F, that's the deliveries and performance information for you. And especially for those of you who are in construction, the period of performance will be listed in here according to how many calendar days after issuance of a written notice to proceed. That is your period of performance. And the calendar days are determined using the Julian calendar. Next slide, please. This is section F. It's a snapshot of section F for construction. This is how the information will be presented within section F, and that's how you will know what the proposed anticipated period of performance would be. As always in your proposal, you can always propose to do it faster or sooner. But the minimum requirement is stated in section F by the government for how long they think that the project should take and when it should be completed. And that's the schedule you would be held to. Next slide, please. And again, like I said, you want to comply with their stated delivery requirements, but you can always propose to deliver faster or sooner. And the period of performance may be negotiable. Okay. Next slide, please. Section G of the solicitation is where the contract administration information is placed. You'll see the accounting and appropriation data. That basically is for the contracting folks. They'll know which pot of money is being used to fund that particular acquisition. And it gives you, the contractor, instruction on how to submit your electronic invoices and how you'll get paid electronically. And some of the administration information in there that's important to you. It'll identify who your contracting officer and your contract administrator will be after the contract is awarded. Those are your main contacts. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of what section G will look like. And you'll see how the information is presented within section G. Next slide, please. Special emphasis. Oh, yep, there we go. Special emphasis concerning section G. Basically, if you want to get paid, you follow the instructions that is included in section G. Tells you how you submit your invoices, and it tells you how you're going to get paid. And during the performance of a contract, sometimes the contract we'll see a change in administration. Contracting officers may change, or the contract administrator may change. And if that occurs, the notification to you, the contractor, comes in the form of a modification that the contracting folks will issue to the contract, the modification to the contract itself. And in that modification, they'll say that in section G, there's been a change in contracting officer or administrator. Another name that you would see in there would be who would be in charge of inspecting your projects. The Kawali insurance people, they will be named in there. That's where you find out who's administering your contract. You want to pay special attention to that. Next slide, please. Section H. Section H has those clauses that are not stated elsewhere in the solicitation. They could be unique, special local clauses that are pertinent to a particular installation or agency. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of what Section H could look like in your solicitation, and it will go on into the awarded contract. And if you were awarded a contract, you are responsible for not just the statement of work, but you're also responsible for being in compliance with the clauses of your contract, the terms and conditions. So you want to make special attention, pay attention to those clauses, okay? Next slide, please. And again, you want to pay special attention to the tailored local clauses. And for folks who are in construction, often there may be special prevailing wages for certain trades that's not covered in the DOL's wage determination for Davis-Bacon. So the contracting officer will have a special clause in Section H that will capture the prevailing wages that you'll be using on your contract. It'll be in Section H. So you want to make sure that you incorporate that in your proposal and in your pricing for the contract afterwards. Okay, next slide, please. Going on to Section I. Section I is where all of your clauses that are required by the law, regulation, etc., that's where they're going to be listed. They could be incorporated via the reference or in full text. And they dictate the terms and conditions of your contract performance as well. Next slide. Here is a snapshot of what Section I could look like. Most of the clauses in there are going to be mandatory clauses. Then there will be special clauses in there also, depending upon what the contract bought. Like for instance, FAR Part 36 covers construction. If this is a construction contract that you're going to be working on, you will have clauses that cross-reference back to Part 36 of the FAR. Next slide, please. Special emphasis for offerers. These contract clauses, as I said, they govern the terms and conditions of your performance. They're extremely important. You need to pay attention to them, especially to tailored clauses where the government will fill in special information that's pertinent to that specific contract. And there could be fill-ins that you are required to fill in and provide information in the proposal itself. So pay attention to that. You don't want to omit that because that could get you kicked out of the competition. And some of the important information for construction contractors, for instance, that would be included here would be whether or not there's a mandatory site visit for a particular project, or information regarding liquidated damages. And there will always be information regarding funding availability. No funding, no contract. Okay, so you want to pay attention to all of that, because it's quite possible that you may be asked to put together a proposal for an acquisition that will not get funded until the end of the government's fiscal year, which would be around the September timeframe. That's when their money starts to flow sometimes. And they will let you know via the solicitation. There would be language in there to let you know that award is pending funding availability. Contract will not be awarded till funding is absolutely available. Okay. Next slide, please. Section J. Section J is where statements of work, performance work statements, specifications, drawings, tech manuals, standard operating procedures, all of those type of documentation that the government uses, it will be incorporated into the solicitation via a list of attachments rather than being incorporated at Section C. If it's too large, too many pages, it will be listed in Section J and added to the solicitation as an attachment. Okay. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of what Section J could look like. The list of attachments, you'll see that they're listed by date and the number of pages. When you're putting your proposal together and you're looking at all the reference documents, you want to make sure that you have the latest documentation by date and the number of pages. You want to make sure that what you're using is complete and accurate and up to date in putting your proposal together. It is up to the government to provide that to you. So if you find that you have something that's out of date or it's missing from your package, you contact the government, the contracting officer, and let them know so they can provide it to you. Most things now is digital. They will tell you the website that you can go to that you can download some of those documents. Okay, next slide, please. Again, special emphasis for offerors. Make sure you have complete and up-to-date documents. And periodically through an acquisition, if a source selection takes a long time to get something onto contract, it's possible that the Department of Labor will publish a more up-to-date set of wage determinations, especially for Davis-Bacon. And if that's the case, then what the contracting folks will do, they will issue an amendment to the solicitation, letting you know that there are more up-to-date new wage determinations that you have to use when it comes to putting your price proposal together. And you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date wage determinations. And as part of your proposal package that you're going to be submitting later, you will acknowledge that you received the amendment to the solicitation. You will actually acknowledge it, because if you fail to acknowledge any amendments, that's something that could get you kicked out of the competition. Okay. Next slide, please. Section K, representation and certifications. This is where you tell the government about your company, your certifications as a small business, what your status is, etc., what NAICS codes you're qualified for, and all of the information that you're going to be submitting in Section K, because this is where most of your fill-in clauses and little paragraphs are going to be. You really have to pay close attention to Section K. You're going to be filling in a lot of information. You want to make sure that the information you provide cross-references back to your online profile and registration in sam.gov. Because when the government receives your proposal, they're looking at Section K as part of their evaluation of your proposal. They will go back and they will call up your online registration in SAM. And they will look at the information to make sure that everything jives, everything matches, okay? And as we mentioned in the last session, we talked about NAICS codes. We talked about online registrations in the sam.gov website. We want to make sure that you get yourself updated annually. And whenever you add new NAICS codes to your qualifications and capabilities, we want to make sure that you update your registration to show that you're qualified for more NAICS codes, because that basically is your resume. Tells the government what you're qualified to perform. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of Section K, what it looks like. At the very top, you notice that there are special clauses that pertain specifically to Section K. And then thereafter, you're going to have a lot of reading in Section K, and you're going to have fill-ins to do. Make sure that you cover all of that. Don't leave anything out. Next slide, please. And again, a special emphasis, Pay attention to the clause fill-ins, cross-reference to your registration online at sam.gov, update annually. Okay. Next slide, please. Section L. This is one of the most important sections to you as an offerer when you're putting your proposal together. Section L, and then of course later Section M. You really, really want to pay close attention. Section L is where the government tells you what to put in your proposal that comes back to them. Talks about formatting, if you're going to be providing cost or pricing data, your technical approach, if you're addressing like maybe a sample project or something. This is where you're going to give the government information about how your organization, how your company is structured. And you're going to be providing sections of proposal that's actual narrative. You're going to be writing and talking about your management, your staffing plan. You may provide an executive summary. This is where you would know what to include regarding resumes of your key personnel. And you're also going to be providing proof that you're eligible to propose. You will provide actual proof to the government what your small business certifications are to prove that you are eligible to propose. And when needed, the government will ask for information regarding your past performance. Okay. And Section L gives you more detailed information of how and where you're going to be submitting your proposal. More and more now, they are actually allowing you to submit your proposal digitally, electronically, or by fax, rather than actually delivering in person. But that information will be in Section L. Okay. And if there's going to be a site visit or a pre-proposal conference, you'll have more detailed information regarding that. And in those acquisitions that are extremely detailed, like for instance, for an IDIQ contract or a MAC, there's additional instructions that the government will be providing to you via an attachment to solicitation. So you'll have Section L as part of your regular solicitation, and then you will have additional instructions attached to the solicitation that you need to pay attention to as well. Okay. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of Section L, what it could look like. You have your little clauses, you've got your paragraphs, and all of the valuable information that the government is providing to you and what you need to include in your proposal. Next slide, please. And as we always tell everybody, read it, do it, eat a banana. Pay attention to Section L. Provide everything back. You provide everything back that the government's asking for in the formatting, in the sequence, and in the manner that the government is dictating to you. That's what we refer to as answering the mail. Okay. And the government will instruct you on whether or not you need to leave off the company name or the logo on any other pages other than the cover page, especially when it comes to the technical proposal. They may tell you, use cage codes only in that particular section of the proposal, the technical proposal. You use your cage code only to identify yourself. And the evaluation team, it consists of contracting people, and it consists of the program or technical experts. They don't want those folks influenced by any past experience or knowledge of your company. We want everybody to have an objective point of view when they go in to evaluate a proposal. They will judge it clearly and simply on the information that's provided by you in your proposal. So that's why they tell you, don't identify with your company name or your logo on any other pages other than the first page. And if past performance is going to be evaluated, you want to make sure that the references that you're going to be using to provide your past performance assessments, you want to make sure that they submit their questionnaires on time. Those questionnaires, you will ask them to submit their questionnaires directly back to the contracting officer. Okay, it doesn't come back to you, it goes to the contracting officer as part of the proposal package. Next slide, please. Now, section M. This is extremely valuable for you. This is the section of the solicitation where the government tells you how they're going to evaluate your proposal. What it is that they look at, the elements in your proposal, how they look at it, and how they will evaluate it. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of section M. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. All of this is information. It's a sample information for what section M could look like. Lots of information in there, lots of detailed information in there. Tells you how the government is going to score proposals, the criteria that they're going to use, the system they're going to use, because sometimes they use colors, sometimes they just use narrative. And when you're looking at section M, you want to be looking at this as though you yourself are the evaluator, because the evaluators, when they're preparing to start looking at proposals, they put together a checklist for themselves. They go through section M that's put together by the contracting folks. The checklist tells all evaluators, all the raters, whether they're contracting people or technical people, this is how you will evaluate the proposal so everybody's on the same sheet of music. It standardizes the process, tries to keep it as objective as possible so that the most fair results will come out of the evaluation process. And because of the criteria and how it's substantiated, contracting can then substantiate how the winner is chosen. Everything has to be documented. Everything is carefully reviewed and approved and inspected before the award is made. And the contracting people, because they are the writers of the contract, they are responsible for substantiating every decision that's made regarding the evaluation of the proposals and the selection of the successful offerer. And this is how they're going to do that, using this criteria. Sometimes in protests, post the word protests, the government is protested against because they failed to follow their own instructions. These instructions are for the contracting people to follow. And it tells you, it gives you an insight of how the government's going to be looking at your proposal. And next slide, please. This gives you information of how everything is weighted and how everything is evaluated, the criteria and the various tiers or levels of the evaluation. And you looking at this and putting your proposal together, you can take a look at this and say, well, okay, this is part of my strategy for my proposal. I see the kind of criteria, the level of information, the level of detailed information the government is looking for. And you determine for yourself, this is the level that I'm aiming for. I want to have my proposal come in as one of their very best top contenders. And in order to do that, this is what I have to incorporate within my proposal. This is what the government is looking for. And this is what I will provide in my proposal to make sure that I hit that targeted tier of evaluation. So this can help you make sure that your proposal meets the standards so that you can get the ratings that you're going after, so that you'll be one of the top contenders for consideration for award. The government provides you all of the information you need right there. All you have to do is read it, pay attention to it, and then act on it. Okay? Next slide, please. Next slide. Yep, one more. Next slide. Yep, thank you. Again, comply with the criteria and do what the government does. Make yourself a checklist of the requirements that you're going to be finding. Now, the requirements of how to do the work is going to be in your statement of work, or for a service contract, it'll be in your performance work statement. You go through those documents to see the list of the taskings, the projects, and the requirements that the contract is buying. You're going to make sure that your proposal references back to those particular paragraphs within the statement of work or the performance work statement, so that the government, as they're doing their evaluations, they go back and forth looking at your proposal, they're looking at the statement of work, they're looking at their checklist for evaluation to make sure that you are answering the mail. Okay? And you want to make sure that it's easy to follow and that it's very, very discernible. The government doesn't have to read between the lines. They don't have to get out a crystal ball to try to figure out what it was that you were trying to say. Your proposal is well written, it's articulate, and it answers the mail. Okay? Next slide, please. In reviewing the solicitation, again, read it very carefully from cover to cover. And then I always say, read it again just to make sure. Make a list for yourself of everything that you're capturing in that solicitation so that you can pay attention to it later. You're putting it together yourself, a checklist for the proposal preparation. Pay attention to the requirements and the evaluation criteria. Pay attention to how the evaluation criteria is being weighted in section M. Regarding key personnel and certifications, the key personnel that you're going to include in your proposal, the folks that you intend to use in satisfying the contract if you get it awarded to you, make sure that their certifications, their licenses, their qualifications matches what the contract requires. And basically what the government wants to know in their solicitation is that you understand what they need, you can fill that need and deliver, you can work together with them as a team, and that you stand out from your competitors. Next slide, please. And the next slides after this is basically what I put together as a proposal writing plan for trying to get high ratings, okay? You're going to pay attention. Who is your audience and what do they care about? What is their pain? What is it that they're trying to satisfy or resolve or fix by issuing a contract and using you as a possible source to get that done? And what is the message that you want to contain within your proposal? Now, a lot of proposal writers now, they talk about what's the theme of the proposal? Is there going to be a win theme or the features, the benefits that you're going to be conveying in your proposal? Think about all of that as you put it together. Putting together your proposal is a strategy. And what you're doing is you're painting the picture of success that you are proposing to the government. If they award to you, this is the picture of success that they can anticipate. And you want to prove it, that you've done this before, that you're capable of doing it again successfully for the government. And you prove it through photographs or graphics. There may be testimonials, letters of appreciation that you've received for past clients that were satisfied with your performance. So basically, you want to prove it. And the basic formula that you're looking at when you're putting together a proposal is there's the problem that the government has advertised to you. You have a proposed solution, and if they accept your solution by awarding you the contract, this is the results that the government can expect. Next slide, please. We always advise contractors to use plain English when you're putting together the narratives, the section of the proposal that requires writing. Use plain English, direct, simple sentences. Don't put a lot of fluffy wording in there. You want to be very, very precise and to the point. And you want to provide details. You want to make sure that you're conveying your company's strengths and capabilities. You want to make sure that in your proposal, you address every requirement the government has talked about in their solicitation. especially the requirements that are addressed in the statement of work or a performance work statement when it comes to service contracts. And you're going to see in section M all of the criteria that the government is using to evaluate your proposal. You want to make sure that you address every criteria within your proposal, and you want to make sure that it's as strongly addressed as possible so that you get those high ratings. You want to make sure that you articulate well to the government your expertise and your experience. Next slide. Oftentimes, you may not get the chance to do a revised proposal. So you want to make sure that the proposal you submit is your best effort. Don't exaggerate. You got to be truthful, and you make sure that it's easy to read. And you want to make sure that, that the government gets a good impression of you. So avoid typos and grammatical errors. Sometimes the first impression that the government is going to get about you and your company, the quality and the excellence of your company's performance, is looking at the proposal. And proposals that are poorly put together, the wording, there's misspellings, things like that. When I was a contracting officer, when I looked at poorly put together proposals and proposals that did not answer the mail, that there were omissions, and the contractors did not clearly state how they would, their technical approach in actually performing a particular project or whatever, that would give me a poor impression of the contractor. If they could not follow the instructions in section L and M of a solicitation, could I trust them to follow the instructions, the terms and conditions of a contract if I award it to them later? Realize that all this gives the government an impression of you and your company. So you want to make sure that the documentation and everything else that you provide is top quality. Okay. In the solicitation in section L, the government will actually state to you what the page limits for each section is going to be, the font sizes you're supposed to use. If you exceed a page limit, for instance, on your technical approach, when they get to that last page that is supposed to stop, they won't read any further beyond that. So you make sure you stay within the page limits. And because you need to be very precise and detailed in how you write things, no fluff. Okay, you don't need a lot of additional flowery verbiage and all that. Check your numbers. Then check your numbers again, your cost estimating, because you don't want to have to come back to the government later and say, oh, I made a mistake in my pricing. Or have the government take a look at your proposal, your price proposal, and say, well, wait a minute, obviously these numbers don't add up. There's obvious glaring mistakes in them. You don't want the government having to come back and tell you. Something is, we want to make sure that there's no discrepancies here. Please validate, verify to us that your numbers are correct. You want everything perfect, okay? And I always advise contractors, have somebody who's outside of your proposal team take a look at everything. If they can take a look at it and see from their standpoint that you answered the mail, everything makes sense, that the proposal is complete, and everything flows together well, the story that you're telling, the theme that you're conveying flows well, then that usually means that your proposal is going to be, it'll pass the first screening that the government will do regarding proposal evaluation. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can use graphics to tell a story. Now, don't put graphics in your proposal just for the sake of using graphics, because I've seen that happen before too. You want graphics to serve a purpose. For instance, it can possibly cut out some of the narrative. Picture says 1,000 words, and it can be used to supplement and complement the information that you're providing. You can stick graphics in there. You can use spreadsheets. I've seen spreadsheets used to convey, for instance, You want to prove to the government, you're proposing for an IDIQ where there may be several task orders that will be performed concurrently. And you can provide a spreadsheet that shows that you are already performing numerous contracts or task orders concurrently. And you can use it via a spreadsheet, for instance. It tells the story right there. And when it comes to past performance, you want the past performance information to demonstrate your expertise and your experience. So those past performance examples that you want to provide as reference for your capabilities, match them up to what the projects are going to be on that current requirement, the awarded contract. Especially when the government is telling you the price ranges of what those task orders could anticipate to be, the level of complexity, match up the past projects that you've done to those current requirements to show that you're already performing at that level. You want to include information about the performance ratings that you received, your CPARs that you received when you did those projects. And if those projects were completed, they were not for government agencies, but for other maybe commercial sector, private sector, you still had assessments. You still performed work that can be extrapolated and compared to what you would be doing for the government. So it's all valuable information. So the information that you provide regarding your past performance, you want to talk about the quality, the timeliness, and the cost controls that you utilized in performing the work, any particular business practices that you developed that is unique to your particular company that was very successful for you. You want to have any evidence, testimonials, letters of appreciation to show that your client was very satisfied with your performance. And in there, you also want to talk about the past performance and the qualifications of the key personnel that you are proposing to use in satisfying the upcoming contract. And you want to talk about the impact. What was the significance of that past performed project that you may have done? That it had great impact for your client, had great impact for a community. You want to talk about those kind of things, okay? Provide that information to the government. Next slide. And the final tips that I wanted to provide to you for maximizing your proposal. Okay. Again, you want to demonstrate to your contractor or to the client that you understand what their needs are and that you are able to satisfy what those needs are. Because you're familiar with the terminology that the government uses, you know how the government works, you know how the government thinks, you're able to communicate with them in their own language, using their own terminology. And you show in your proposal, step by step, the solution that you're offering, because you want to provide detail, explain exactly how you are going to perform a particular project or whatever. You want to be very clear and you want to articulate all that to the government. And you want your proposal to basically tell the government your competitive edge over your rivals. Why should they pick you over a competitor? This is what you bring to the table that would be a great benefit for the government, okay? And you want to connect the proof to your solution. If they select you, they award the contract to you, your solution, you can prove that it's going to be successful because you've done it, you've been there before, and you've done it before. Okay. Next slide. Basic summarization. A well-written proposal adheres to the requirements of the RFP. You looked at it, you read it, and you complied with the instructions that were given to you by the government. You answer the mail because you provide back to the government everything that they expect to see in your proposal. Your proposal paints the picture of success. You get it? You get what the government's asking for. This is how you're going to provide it to them. This is how you're going to do that. And this is the result that you could feel confident in promising to the government if they select you as their successful offerer. You've been there, you've done it, and you bought the t-shirt. And in doing it, you're better at it than your competition. That is what a well-written proposal provides back to the government. And basically, that's how you answer the mail. Okay. Lots of information here. Again, as I mentioned before, these slides will be available to you for your reading pleasure later, if I haven't bored you to death now. But hopefully this will be useful to you in seeking those government contracts. Okay. Proposal writing in a lot of ways is an art, but it's an art that anybody can learn and become very capable doing. Just read the solicitation and put your strategy together and go for it. And remember, you can't win if you don't play. So start putting in those proposals and those bids for those government contracts, okay? So anyway, that is our last slide. If there are any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them now if possible.
Thank you so much, Sam. We do have a little bit of time here, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, you go ahead and do so as well. We'll allow some couple minutes for that. I believe that's Alika's contact information, but we can also
Yes.
share Sam's information in our post-event email, so please be on the lookout for that.
Excellent.
Okay, it doesn't look like we haven't gotten any questions. So let me just check here. Andrea says, thank you very much. Thank you for attending as well, Andrea. I do see here Francis may have a question. Let me unmute you. You could go ahead and unmute yourself, Francis, and ask away.
Yes. So the question that I have is whether or not this presentation is going to be shared.
Yes, the slides are going to be made available to you on the MBDA Phoenix Center's website. And you can go in there and take a look at it. Because as I mentioned, it's a huge presentation with all these various slides. I went through them very, very fast. So you'll be able to go into the slides and take a look at each one. And all of the slides for the previous presentations will also be available to you on that website as well.
Yes, we'll send out today's recording as well, Francis, for you to access as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we can go ahead and wrap up the presentation today. Again, thank you so much, Sam, for your time. And we will have Sam back on for our last session later this month. Next week, we have another presenter talk about certifications and you need them. So please make sure to visit our website for more details and register for that session. I do see here that Alika has a question here. So. Okay, Alika, you could go ahead and unmute yourself, I believe. Alika, can you hear me? You could go ahead and speak. Should be able to now.
Elizabeth, this is Yvette. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Yvette.
Sam, where can clients find a redacted example proposal?
Well, what they could do is, if they want to get one that's a proposal that's actually submitted in response to an RFP, the government, they could go through FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. They would then basically submit their FOIA request to the contracting office. Now, most of the time, proposals are considered to be proprietary information. So it's quite possible that their request might be denied. They could more likely get copies of past RFPs in which proposals were submitted. The proprietary information that is unique to a contractor, all of that would be redacted because that's something that the government would never share. But that really is the only place that I could see. Now, sometimes if you go on the internet, there may be consultants who may publish samples of proposals, samples of proposal writing, checklists for putting together proposals, usually under business development. But other than that, trying to get somebody's actual proposal, I don't think of any other way, you know. FOIA might be an avenue, but like I said, you will never receive another contractor's proprietary information. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Sam.
Okay, so with that, I think we're going to wrap up this presentation, and we will go ahead and continue with our member orientation. So our business development team will go ahead and present that in just a couple minutes. Again, thank you so much, Sam. We'll go ahead and stop recording and
Okay,
conclude
thank
this
you very
piece of the
much for inviting
presentation.
me. Bye-bye now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and have anyone who is interested in learning more about the Chamber, our initiatives and programs such as these remain on the line if you'd like to learn more. But with that, we officially wrapped up the presentation part. So we'll give it just a minute or two to